So now you've completed your PI planning and you're feeling pretty good. Or are you? I mean, how well have you really done? And that is the topic of today's video. Firstly, really sorry for the gap in the series. I've been away at work for a while and things have got pretty crazy, but I'm back now. And this is the very last video in this PI Planning for Beginners series. Okay, so let's get started. Well, in the last video, we looked at the confidence voting. You know, effectively, this indicator, this vote of confidence, if you like, by the entire group in terms of how well we've done. So if you've not watched that video, I suggest you go back and you have a look at that, and the link will be in the description below. Now, in this video, what we are going to be looking at is the very last session in a PI planning event. So it's arguably one of the most important elements as well, and one that is frequently overlooked or just given short shrift because it comes at the end, people are exhausted and very tired, and people can sort of like get tempted to sort of like just ignore this piece of the event. But I think it's really, really important, and in this video I want to show you why. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is what is a retrospective. Right, so if we look at a definition, our trusty Google comes up with a definition that says something like looking back on or dealing with past events or situations. Well, effectively in our context, this is our PI planning event. But essentially the intent is for us to create this powerful learning loop so that we can do an action and we can actually have a look and look back at that action and see what information and what lessons we can actually take away from that action. Now, in nature, many animals naturally display this kind of behavior and actually work in learning loops. So for example, foraging ants, when they leave their nest, they leave with one job in mind, and that is to find food. But when they actually find food, they don't just go and bring the food back, they actually leave a chemical trail so that the other ants can follow, get to the food in a very straightforward path. Not only that, bees also have something called a woggle dance. That shows the other bees where there's honey so that they can also locate this easily. So in this way, we've got learning loops that are part of nature, and animals also display them. And of course, human beings, we are ones that can really benefit from this as well. But let's have a look before we get stuck into more detail in terms of what are the different types of learning loops. So we've got two types of learning loops really. One is what you might call a negative learning loop. And the other one, yeah, you guessed it, is a positive learning loop. And so let's have an example of what a negative learning loop is. So a negative learning loop is something that serves to maintain the equilibrium or the homeostasis. So for example, when you eat a sugary meal, your body creates insulin to keep your blood sugar within a certain range. Okay, if you eat something, if you eat something with a high amount of sugar, your body is going to release higher insulin to keep it within the level, and if you eat something that is not so sugary, your body is not going to need to release quite so much insulin. So that's an example of a negative feedback loop that's actually there to try and maintain the equilibrium. Now let's look at an example of what a positive feedback loop is. So a positive feedback loop is something that's looking to improve or change the status of a system, right? So for example, if we cut our finger, what happens is our system activates a clotting agent and a clotting system that allows our body to stop the bleeding. So what it does is it actually pushes our body out of that normal status into a different status so that we can actually adapt and respond to our current situation. So our PI planning retrospective is an example of a positive feedback loop where what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at what the challenges we actually had, and we're trying to see how we can actually improve our PI planning event itself. Now, the key thing about feedback loops is that it's got two key areas that we need to be aware of. And the first thing is the feedback loop. For it to be complete, it must be acted on. Now, I'm seeing this quite frequently when we do retrospectives, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody, is that we can very easily forget that the actions are why we are actually doing it. And for a feedback loop to be completed, we must act upon the feedback that we have received. So that's point number one. And the second point that I'd like to raise as well is we do have to be careful, because what happens is when we make a change in the system, it can impact other areas as well. So we frequently do that. When we're looking at changes, it's so easy. For example, if we were to take a drug and it's got a whole bunch of side effects, if we take that without considering those side effects, sometimes the side effects can be worse than the disease it's supposed to be curing. So we've got to be very cognizant of any change and what the ripple effects of that change could be on the system as well. So let's have a look and see what is a PI planning retrospective, right? So PI planning retrospective, if you think about it, as we said, it's a positive feedback loop, but also if you look at the PI planning event, it's got a lot of moving parts. And so there are many different aspects that could need improvement as well. And so one of my favorite books that I like on retrospectives is Agile Retrospectives, Making Good Teams Great by Esther Darby and Diana Larson. So I think this is a great book. It's got some great ideas in here as well, some of which I have pinched as well for this video. So let's have a look at some options for our retrospectives, okay? So what I typically like to do is I like to keep it really, really simple, because look, people are going to be really tired after 2 days or 3 days of planning. So what you don't want to do is make it really extended or really long, okay? So I've got some tips on how you can deal with that. But what I want to talk to you in the next section now is the type of retrospectives that I typically use. So I typically use a very straightforward retrospective. So if you see over here, you've got the smiley face, you've got the not so smiley face, and you've got the light bulb over here. Sometimes it's referred to as mad, sad, and glad. Sometimes it's referred to as what went well, what didn't go so well, and what can we do better. Regardless of what you use, it's something that most people are familiar with and something that's quite intuitive. Okay, you don't probably need a lot of explanation for that as well, even if somebody hasn't been used to the agile ways of working or agile retrospectives before. So I find that really good. Also, it means that you can get through a retrospective relatively quickly as well. So that's what my kind of default, if you like, or what I go for. If I want a more comprehensive deep dive, I might ask people to use what's called a stop. We want to stop doing these behaviors or these activities, and I might ask for 3 things. What do you want to start? And to ask for 3 things. And what do you want to continue? Ask for 3 things. That makes for a longer retrospective, more comprehensive. So you have to see whether people have the appetite for that as well. Okay, but that is another option. Okay, so one other thing, imagine now you've done a bunch of these retrospectives and now you're improving, but you've also got a bunch of the areas that you realize that these are areas that you really want to specifically target. Okay, let's look at this as an example. Let's just say you, in one of your PI planning retrospectives, people said, look, the inputs are not that clear. The architectural runway is not that clear. Maybe the features are not that clear. So what you could do is in your retrospective, you could actually target that and you could say, okay, how clear are the inputs as an example? Vote on that, right? Here's another thing. If people felt that, you know, there was not enough gap between the different sessions, or they were over exhausted or very tired, how sustainable was it? And then people can vote on that. So how are you improving that particular area which may have been identified as a challenge? Or maybe you had a challenge with timekeeping that came up in a previous retrospective. You can get people to start to vote on that. Now, what I like, if you're doing things online, I think I like Slido as a kind of voting tool. I think it's free and it's pretty cool. And I've covered that off in the confidence voting video as well. So you can have a look and see how we can use that. But I find that that would be quite an easy way to do it. But what I want to do is, before I go, I would like to give you 3 quick tips as well for retrospectives that can actually be quite hopefully useful for you. So the 3 quick and simple tips. So the first one is about making sure it's available. So what do I mean by that? Now, your PI planning event might span 2 or 3 days, right? So if you make the PI planning, whether it's a board, whether it's in person or whether it's online, make that available from the beginning and encourage people to fill that out on a daily basis. You're not leaving all of that heavy lifting towards the end when people are really exhausted. So I'd say make it available and encourage people to fill it out as we go along. So that's my first tip. The next tip that I would say is try and make it visible. So whether it is in your in-person room, in your PI planning event, make sure the board is visible, people know where it is. Maybe it's in a place where people are going to be walking past. If it's online, whether you're using a Miro, a Mural, or one of the other many tools that you may use for PI planning, you can actually make sure that it's available over there. Or if you're using a tool such as Retro, which I'll be also giving a demo towards the end of this video as well on that, so you can say, if you wait till the end, you'll see that as well. Okay, so make sure it's really visible. And then finally, I'd say make sure, as I said, there's a place for you to log and keep your very clear, tangible actions. These are the things we want to improve in the next PI planning. And you know what, guys, this is the most important thing, right? We're constantly improving. Doesn't matter where we are. Doesn't matter where we are. As long as we've got this idea that we're going to continuously improve, we're continuously going to get better, we're continuously going to be learning, and we can start to create that culture. And if you can try and create a safe environment in your team where people are like, they're willing to be vulnerable, they're willing to be make mistakes, then you've got something really special going on. Right, now, as I said, as I hinted, in case you're wondering what tool I use, I typically like to use the Retro.io tool, and I use it for 3 reasons, really. One, it's free, does a pretty good job. But secondly, what I like is that the participants can vote. So when you're like kind of at the end of your PI planning event, you can actually just discuss the ones that really resonate with other people as well. And then that way you can actually cut down the amount of time that you spend on the retrospective as well. And people can you can also see what are the general themes that span across the entire audience, okay? And also it's got a clear option for you to actually add actions as part of the retrospectives, which is great. So let's go over now and let's have a quick look and see how I would put together a sample PI planning event retrospective in the Retro.io tool. So this is the Retro.io tool that I actually use. I really like it because it's really simple and straightforward. And so obviously you need to create an account first. Once you've done that, you can just log in. And all you need to do, this is how easy it is to create a board. You go in there, we'll just call it PI Planning Test 1 Retro, okay? And let's just say what went well, what didn't go so well, and what can we do better. So we just keep it really simple. What can we do better? Okay, fine, perfect. So then we create that, and you can actually save it as a template, so you don't even have to do that next time. All right. I typically create a public board because we don't put confidential stuff on the retros. And there you have it. So now you've got your board, and it's just as simple as people then coming in here. What I like to do is create a board before the PI planning. People can come in here throughout the PI planning, publish the link, make sure it's available, encourage people, remind people to come in and update it as they go through the different events within the PI planning overall event, and just add the things that they like about it. Okay, timing was great, whatever, right? Okay, and then you get the people to great energy and love meeting everyone, whatever. Okay, and so you've got that. For the what went well, what didn't go so well, what can you do better? A couple of things to point out. That's how simple it is to just put something in there. The thing that I really like about it is you can vote. So when you come down here, you can see everybody else's items on here. Now you can vote. So what ends up happening is that the things that really resonate, people vote them up. And that I would encourage, because then if you sort of like say, okay, we do that. Let's say I think, okay, great energy, right? Then I can sort it by the, if I can get that right. Right. So then all of the top most voted items that come towards the top of the list. And that's really great, because towards the end of the PI planning, if you are sort of like wanting to do a quick retro, you can just go through the top, I don't know, the top 5 items that have been voted the most by people. You can see those really resonate with people, and the same things that there were people all agreed that, for example, you know, the timing was off, or you know, some aspect of your PI planning, the features weren't right, whatever it is, right? That didn't go so well. And then obviously, what is it you think you can do better? But the other thing I like about this is the following. So you say, okay, now we need to improve our features in this way, right? Whatever it is, okay? Blah, blah, okay? Right, perfect, all right? So not happy with our features. We think there's this problem. Maybe the acceptance criteria wasn't right, whatever it is, okay? And now if you see over here, you've kind of got an action list over here, which is pretty cool, right? Because then you can assign it to whoever you want, etc., etc. So that's retro.io in a nutshell. I find it pretty useful, and as I said, what I like about it is rather than trying to get everybody to do it all in one go, if you share the link before the PI planning, then you can get people to sort of like add it in real time, and towards the end of your 2-day event, you've got a fairly well populated board. What I do find though, it is useful to sort of like give some time towards the end of the PI planning, because with the best will in the world, some audiences, they're not always that meticulous, and especially when they're doing it the first time, it's useful to get them used to you know, doing this collective retrospective as well. But that's how I tend to do it, and yeah, I find the tool fairly straightforward and easy to use, and so that's why I recommend this tool. If you want something simple and easy, I'm sure there are other ones out there. If there are other tools that you think, oh, you're missing a trick, there's something much better out there, let me know. Put it in the comments below, and we'll go from there. Thanks very much. Okay, so there you have it. It's the final video in the PI Planning for Beginners series. Hopefully this series should give you a really good flavor of what's involved. We've walked you through an example. We've given you some insights into the terms and what to expect and how to respond to the many challenges. Thanks very much for your support and your words of encouragement and your messages and everything else. They mean so much to me. Please keep them coming. If there are any questions, I will try my best to answer them. If you're not subscribed, please do so, and I'll be announcing my next series shortly. So take care and look forward to seeing you soon. Don't forget the most important thing. Love learning, keep growing, and don't forget to bring the joy. See you till next time. Thanks very much. Bye.